The sound of wood cracking echoed through the quiet street, and everyone froze. This was the moment the HOA never expected, and it would end in a courtroom shock no one saw coming. Ethan had built his garage years ago, right beside his small home at the edge of the neighborhood. It wasn't flashy, but it was solid, legal, and approved by the city long before the HOA existed. For him, the garage meant safety, storage, and peace. For the HOA president, Karen, it was a personal target. She said it blocked community aesthetics, even though neighbors disagreed. Letters came first. Then warnings. Then fines. Ethan refused to pay. He stayed calm, believing rules still mattered. One morning, he woke to shouting. Construction machines were already rolling in. Karen stood there with folded arms and a smile that felt rehearsed. She waved a paper claiming emergency authority. Before Ethan could stop them, part of the garage wall collapsed. His heart dropped. Neighbors recorded everything. Karen didn't flinch. She said it was over. Ethan said nothing. He simply turned and walked inside, opening a drawer he hadn't touched in years. Inside was a thick folder of documents, yellowed with time, signed and stamped long before Karen ever lived there. As sirens approached in the distance, Ethan looked back at the broken garage and whispered that this story wasn't ending here. It was only beginning. And the truth was about to surface in a place Karen never imagined facing it. Karen believed power came from speaking louder, standing taller, and never backing down. She had no idea that silence could be far more dangerous. After the destruction, the HOA sent a statement declaring the garage non-compliant and the issue resolved. Karen posed for photos, confident the neighborhood would move on. But Ethan didn't argue. He didn't shout. He documented everything. Photos. Videos. Witness statements. City permits. Every piece went into a growing file. Neighbors began stopping by quietly, offering support, saying they felt bullied too but were afraid to speak. Ethan listened, nodding, taking notes. Karen noticed the change. Doors that once opened for her now closed. Emails went unanswered. She scheduled a mandatory HOA meeting, expecting applause. Instead, she was met with silence and folded arms. Ethan attended but said nothing. He simply handed a clerk a notice stamped with the county seal. It wasn't a lawsuit yet. It was a request, one that forced the HOA to appear in court and explain their authority. Karen laughed it off publicly, calling it a delay tactic. Privately, she started making calls. None went well. The city confirmed the garage permit was valid. A former board member resigned. Karen told herself judges favored HOAs. She told herself confidence wins. But at night, doubt crept in. Why hadn't Ethan reacted sooner? Why had he looked so calm as the garage fell? On the morning of the hearing, Karen arrived dressed sharp, carrying confidence like armor. Ethan arrived with a quiet attorney and a box of files. As they took their seats, the courtroom door closed softly behind them, sealing a moment that would change everything. The courtroom was quiet, but tension filled every corner of the room. This was no longer about a garage, it was about control, pride, and truth. Karen spoke first. She described violations, emergency actions, and her duty to protect the neighborhood. Her voice was firm, rehearsed, convincing. She expected nods. Instead, the judge listened without expression. When it was Ethan's turn, he didn't stand immediately. His attorney placed a single document on the bench. Then another. Then several more. Permits. Surveys. City approvals. Dates that went back decades. The judge leaned forward. Karen's confidence wavered slightly. Ethan finally spoke, calmly explaining that the garage existed before the HOA charter was filed. That the land boundaries were clearly defined. That no emergency existed. The judge asked Karen one question she wasn't prepared for: under what authority did you destroy private property? Karen began to answer, then stopped. Her papers didn't match the dates. Her emergency clause didn't apply. The room felt heavier. Neighbors watched from the benches. The judge requested a recess, taking the documents with him. Karen sat stiffly, whispering to her attorney. Ethan sat quietly, hands folded. When the judge returned, his tone had changed. He announced that further review was required and scheduled a final hearing. But before leaving, he said one thing that made Karen's face pale. He asked the clerk to verify the HOA president's name for the record. The clerk read it aloud. Karen suddenly realized this case wasn't just about Ethan anymore. It was about her. The final hearing drew a full courtroom. Word had spread fast, everyone sensed something irreversible was about to happen. Karen arrived early, but confidence no longer followed her. Emails from the HOA board had stopped. Her attorney avoided eye contact. Ethan entered with the same calm presence, greeting neighbors who had come to support him. When proceedings began, the judge addressed the court directly. He summarized the evidence, the timeline, and the authority or lack of it behind the garage's destruction. Then he turned to Karen. He asked her to stand. She did, hands shaking despite her effort to stay composed. The judge read her name slowly, clearly, making sure it was recorded. He explained that her actions went beyond HOA authority and entered personal liability. The courtroom went silent. Karen's face drained of color. She tried to speak, but the judge raised a hand. He ruled that Ethan's property rights had been violated and that responsibility rested not with the HOA as a whole, but with the individual who ordered the destruction. Karen sat down, stunned. Ethan felt a weight lift from his chest, but the judge wasn't finished. He ordered restitution, reconstruction costs, and legal fees. He also ordered the HOA to revise its governance under city oversight. As the gavel struck, Karen remained frozen, staring forward, realizing that the power she believed protected her had just vanished. Outside the courthouse, sunlight felt different, lighter, warmer, earned. Ethan stepped out knowing he hadn't just won a case, but reclaimed his voice. Neighbors gathered around him, thanking him for standing up when they couldn't. Some admitted they'd paid fines out of fear. Others said they'd been threatened with similar actions. Ethan listened, reminding them that rules only matter when they're fair. Karen exited later, surrounded by silence. No cameras. No supporters. The HOA board released a statement distancing itself from her decisions. Construction crews began rebuilding the garage within weeks, fully funded by the ruling. The city issued a formal notice limiting HOA enforcement powers neighborhood-wide. Ethan watched the garage rise again, stronger than before. He didn't celebrate loudly. He simply smiled, knowing justice didn't need applause. Karen resigned quietly, her name now attached to a case many would reference for years. The neighborhood changed. Meetings became respectful. Notices became transparent. Fear slowly faded. One evening, as Ethan closed his new garage door, a neighbor thanked him for proving that standing still can be more powerful than shouting. Ethan looked at the structure, remembering the crash that started it all. Sometimes, destruction reveals what truly matters. Months later, the neighborhood felt peaceful again, but the lesson lingered, quietly shaping every decision. The rebuilt garage became a symbol not of defiance, but of balance. HOA meetings were calmer, guided by clarity instead of control. New board members were elected, promising transparency. Ethan never ran for a position. He believed change didn't require titles. Karen moved away, her chapter closed by her own choices. People still talked about the case, not as gossip, but as a reminder. When power goes unchecked, it eventually needs truth. Ethan kept the original broken beam from the garage, stored neatly on a shelf. Not as a trophy, but as perspective. He knew silence had worked because it was backed by truth. One evening, he received a letter from the city thanking him for helping clarify property rights for future developments. He folded it carefully, placing it beside the old permits. The past and present finally aligned. The street was quiet again. And this time, it felt earned. Some stories end with noise, this one ended with a name spoken clearly in a courtroom. Karen froze because the judge didn't see a title, he saw responsibility. Ethan never wanted revenge. He wanted fairness. And in the end, fairness spoke louder than authority ever could. The garage stood tall once more, sunlight reflecting off its clean lines. The neighborhood moved forward wiser, calmer, and stronger. What began as destruction became a lesson written into local history. Power without boundaries fails. Truth, when patient, always arrives. Ethan closed his garage door one last time that evening, knowing peace wasn't given, it was defended with integrity, and that was the final twist in this unbelievable HOA story. If you love the drama, don't forget to like, subscribe, and drop a comment sharing your thoughts. It really helps this channel grow.